Hey everyone, I hope you're doing well today. And if you've been following this sleep series, I hope you've gotten some benefit and I hope you're sleeping better. Last time we discussed some benefits to if you can get a better quality sleep, and naturally this time I want to talk about some negatives. And the easy thing would be to just say, okay, everything that we just talked about, reverse that, that's a negative now. So I don't want to do that today. I think that seems pretty obvious. I want to do something that you might actually get something out of. And to me, the less obvious of the topics will be the long-term health benefits, or long-term health side effects, rather. First one we'll talk about is increased risk of cardiovascular disease. It's actually a really cool study that happens twice a year that involves daylight savings. And what studies have shown for the last few years is that the day after we lose an hour of sleep, there's a 24% increase in heart attacks. And not even just that, if that was enough of a correlation, but the day that we gain an hour of sleep, there's a 21% reduction in heart attacks the very next day. So a very strong correlation between the two. If you're interested, this has a lot to do with the fight or flight mechanism. And basically this, so when you're not getting enough sleep from an evolutionary standpoint, that tells the body that you need to upregulate everything. Heart rate goes up, blood pressure goes up, you become insulin resistant, things like that. And it basically keeps you on that edgy flight or flight state where you feel like you can't relax. And that's what kind of wreaks havoc on your cardiovascular system. Increased risk of Alzheimer's. The analogy I like to use for this is it comes down to kind of a waste management problem. Just like how your muscles produce a byproduct when you work out, your brain produces a byproduct when it thinks or when it's engaged all throughout the day. And it's that time when you sleep, just like it does for your muscles, where your brain actually relieves that byproduct. So when you don't get enough sleep, it progressively gets worse and worse, and it compounds over time, depending on the amount of time that you are not getting good enough sleep. That's one of the reasons that countries like America actually have a higher incident rate of Alzheimer's than people in third world countries. It's because you have a interesting combination of two things happening. One, we actually don't get as much sleep on average, and two, we live longer. So when that happens, it kind of compounds the problem over years and years of this byproduct building up in the brain, and it basically kind of has deleterious effects to some of those nerve connections. And so you're not going to get the same rejuvenating qualities, and you're going to have a decline in cognitive function. So not just Alzheimer's, that's just kind of the big example, but cognitive function in general. Increased risk of cancer. I always like to mention the National Cancer Society actually considers third shift work. So if you don't know what that is, it's basically just anybody that works during the night when you would normally be sleeping. It lists third shift work as a probable carcinogen. So to put that in perspective, something like smoking cigarettes is considered to be a known carcinogen. One step below that would be a probable carcinogen. So a very strong correlation between the two. And one study I always like, there's lots of studies that are done, and obviously for ethical reasons, they don't have a lot of human studies with this because they know there's a strong correlation between the two. But there are a tremendous amount of studies on like things like rats. And one of the ones recently that I came across was talking about how they give two groups of rats tumor cells. They inject tumor cells in the back of the rat, and then they wait for about 4 weeks, and then they check the size of the tumor cells. So they basically gave two groups. One group was allowed to sleep as much as they would normally sleep, and the other group was only allowed to sleep 4 hours or less. The group that got 4 hours less of sleep showed a 200% increase in tumor size as compared to the group that was allowed to sleep as much as they wanted. So obviously not a one-to-one correlation for humans, but you can see there's a strong body of evidence behind it. Increased risk of diabetes. For similar reasons for that we discussed for the cardiovascular disease, it's going to make you insulin resistant. And when you look at people that don't get good quality sleep, like we looked at some of those positives as how it affects your workout so positively, right? When you're getting good sleep, you're working out better. When you're getting good sleep, you're less likely to succumb to cravings. Your diet's going to be better. You're going to be better organized for things. So generally, people that get less sleep or lesser quality sleep, they are not going to be in as good a shape. They're going to have more, not only necessarily more fat, but more fat around the midsection specifically, which leads again to diabetes. Those are your two big ones: insulin resistance and being overweight, especially with fat in the midsection. So that's going to have an uptick in diabetes. Negative changes in the microbiome with an increase in bad bacteria and intestinal distress. This one generally most people don't consider to be as serious as the 4 that we mentioned before it, but I like to mention it just because, one, again, there's a strong body of evidence behind it, and two, it has negative effects that run off into the other 4. When your body can't process nutrients well, or, kind of going along with that, when the body is improperly processing nutrients and you're becoming sensitive to things and the intestines kind of become overworked, you're not going to be able to build, recover, and repair from some of the other negative side effects. So it's going to compound everything else on this list, making things much worse. That's what we have for today. I hope this has been informative and useful to you. And the next couple videos, we'll probably talk about some topics like alcohol consumption, caffeine consumption, and the use of sleep medicine.